All right, we're on to part 5, I think. I don't know, I've kind of lost count. It's been a day for me. It's obviously been a day for you watching, but let's just hop right in. So we've got two characters that I'm definitely going to talk quite a bit about. We'll start with Nia here, and she's going to go here in mixed feelings, and I think I'm going to put her right here. Nia, I feel like there's an alternate universe where I really like Nia, and Nia was really good. And that wasn't our universe, and that kind of makes me sad. I could almost kind of justify, in a way, putting Nia in this tier, this little needs love tier, but I think what's kind of keeping her from these guys' level, she, like, this applies, but she needs a lot of love. They like, even in the movie, like, we say, like, oh, she was so much better in the movie, and, like, she was better. Had a lot more of a distinct character, but she wasn't anything outstanding. Like, she had a few snarky little comments and fun little interactions with, like, Ace and Thomas and all, but, like, I don't know, they really just think honing in on her backstory and kind of like her life before going to Sodor, and then perhaps even more important, just what she's doing on Sodor and her character there, which I mean her backstory would largely inform, is just really important, and they really just didn't do any of that with, and then there's her design. This. First of all, this is kind of me, but for some reason, I never really like orange on engines. I don't mind the color orange necessarily, but like all three of kind of the prominent orange characters, I guess other than Rusty, I think orange is great for Rusty, and like I don't even know if I'd call Stepney orange, but I'm also colorblind, so like don't at me. Terrence, it's Terrence. Norman I barely call orange anyways. But even like Reneus, I kind of hated on Reneus. Thumper's kind of fine. He's like a construction machine, so it kind of works. But the three kind of orange engines and like the Northwestern, Murdoch, Billy, and Nia here. I don't know, just on one hand it kind of fits Billy, I think a little bit. It's a very like loud kind of look and like colorful. On one hand, it kind of fits his character. I think Murdoch and Nia, both of them, I would have vastly preferred like a maroon for them. And like, yeah, we say like, oh, then we like don't have our rainbow, but like we already have like in the main cast now. There's just two blue characters, so two red characters wouldn't be that bad. Especially if Nia was like a distinctly different kind of red than James. And maybe there's even a world there where like apparently James and Nia are best friends or something. I guess they said that in one episode or something. Maybe you actually run with that, and like maybe the fact that she's red like starts out and like James like, how could you? But then he's like, oh wow, that's actually cool that we're both red, and like then they kind of are pals through that. I don't know. But just a better design than all that. Just not, didn't really work. But yeah, I want to like Nia more than I do. And I want to say she's got like all this untapped potential, which on one hand I think she kind of does, but I think it, like she really, really needs love, a lot of it. And Norman, this is kind of a weird, Norman, it's, I don't know if I can. Yeah, I don't know. Norman, for one thing, he pisses me off just because like we all know now that like Dennis was gonna be in Day of the Diesels. Same with like Splatter and Dodge, wherever they are. They're down here, still on the list. And Hit wanted new characters instead, so they put in Paxton, Sydney, wherever he's at. There he is, and Norman. Which I'm kind of okay with Paxton and Sydney because I think they're both pretty solid characters. I would have loved to see Splatter and Dodge back. Um, but I think Paxton and Sydney are still pretty good, especially Paxton. I mean, I think I if it was between Splatter and Dodge and Sydney, I would choose Splatter and Dodge without too much hesitation. But between Paxton and Splatter and Dodge, I think I would pick Paxton. Honestly, Paxton's great. We'll get to him pretty soon. But between Norman and Dennis, it's no contest. And here's the thing. If they had made Norman and also brought Dennis, I think that would have been the most interesting things they could have done. Like, the characters they have, I mean, Norman doesn't really have much. He's got, like, biography description things, but he's never really, like, shown anything in the show. Also, his voice is terrible, so on one hand, I almost kind of don't want them to. But from what they, like, do kind of describe of him, like him being all faulty, but he still tries really hard, that's, like, the perfect foil to Dennis. And I'm so upset that they didn't utilize the opportunity to make that a really good dynamic and have them be a really fun duo. So he's almost kind of in the same vein as Nia, but he really, really needs some work done. For one, he needs a new voice, and the other thing is he needs Dennis. I think there's very little way that I can think of that I would want to, like, make Norman interesting without Dennis, or even just like Paxton. Like, I don't know if he just really works by himself. So yeah, Norman. I think this is kind of reverse of, like, my Owen and Merrick bias, where I like them for no good reason. I kind of hate Norman for not no good reason, but, like, for not all that, I guess, kind of bitter reasons. I'm kind of just bitter at Norman, because I don't know, he just, like, yeah, whatever. I don't know. He's freaking Norman. He doesn't do anything. So, yeah. Okay, Old Slow Coach. Old Slow Coach was nice. I really wish we saw more of her. I don't know if I'd say she needs more love, because, like, I don't know, her character felt perfectly strong for what they were doing. So I think I put her in this area. In fact, I think I'll put her above Ned here. I think she was great. I would have loved to see her stay as a, like, prominent character. She could have, like, been on the Great Western. I think she would have been a really good character to, like, fill the gap that was left by them not putting Isabel in the show. So Oliver did not have a coach, and I'm fine with them not using Isabel or the other auto coaches, because, like, I mean, they were never really characters in the Railway series anyways, but just to fill that spot of, like, Oliver having a coach, I think Old Slow Coach could have really fit that. She's Great Western. I think aesthetically she would fit really well in the on the Little Western. And then you can have Toad, there he is, be with Douglas like he should be. I'll get to that perhaps. But yeah, Old Slow Coach was cool. Let's go on to the Olivers. Excavator first, and oops. Oliver the Excavator is indeed quite cool. He's another one of my favorite pack characters. I think we'll put him right about here. He is very cool. I love his mannerisms. I love his little, like, I don't, like, there was just something they kind of gave him in, like, the pack episodes, especially Michael Brandon. I think he really played up his little grunts, I guess you call them, or, like, his murmurs. Just the little, like, kind of noises he would make with Oliver. I think he's got great facial expressions too. And in Lost Treasure, his render is wonderful. He's just a really fun character, so I like him a lot. But the other Oliver, we gotta scroll up a bit here. Even more. Oh yeah, he going to the top. In fact, now this is a tricky one. Like, I kind of have a more personal, like, affinity for tennis. But I think in most regards, Oliver I would consider a better character. In fact, if I was really getting into it, I could honestly argue this, but I'm not going to, because Bill and Ben are my sons, and I love them. But I love Oliver too, and so I'm gonna put him here, but there's kind of, like, I would almost say he and Dennis are kind of tied. But anyways, this is the top 5, or 6, I guess, but counting them as together. So here's my top 5, and this tier is full. It's the only one that kind of has a limit on how many characters I'm putting there, which is just the top 5. So yep, that's that. And this top 5 for me has been like really consistent for pretty much ever. So that's a lot of these tiers are all going to kind of fluctuate around, but like pretty much every tier list I make and post on Twitter like every few months, this is all the same, and this is kind of always the same. And everything else, I mean, it's, I think, generally kind of the same. Like, if you were to look at an old tier list, you'd probably find all these characters kind of in the high tier area, but kind of maybe list to list. The order might be shifted around. Duke might be up here. He might be down there. Whatever. I don't know. Yeah. Anyways, let's keep going. Patrick. He only got the one episode. Like, all the other... boy, I'm kind of scrolling all wacky. He was fun. We're gonna put him... he's not maybe my favorite pack character, but he was good. I think he'll be... I like his attitude, how he is just kind of like... He's kind of portrayed as an like older character, like in the vein of Kelly, even though he's not that old of a basis, but I could find ways to work that out. But I like that he's not just like an old wise character, and he's kind of uses his age as like a way to look down on the younger characters and kind of be like, I'm better than you. That's kind of a fun new aspect. But I don't know, he's nothing special, so we'll just put him next to Ned. How about that? Yeah. And Paxton. Paxton is another really great character. I think there's not too many of the CGI characters, like, would... a lot. I mean, plenty of them, as we've seen, are kind of in, like, this tier. But not too many of them are going to be in, like, the top 3 tiers. We have Luke, the Logging Locos, which I'm sure is making everyone, like, lining up to murder me, but whatever. Glenn and Hero, and Paxton very much gets in this kind of top tier. Just kind of between him and Hero. I think I'd put him below Hero, but he's still a really fun character. He's brings a great dynamic to like the Diesel Works and that kind of clan of characters, and he's just really fun to have around. So I like him a lot. So I think there's maybe going to be just 1 or 2 more CGI characters that are going to kind of be getting into these top tiers, kind of. Probably not necessarily this one, just this tier down here, which is still, as I've been saying, like, these top 3 tiers, even this 4th tier, are just the characters that I adore and would get really excited to see, like, any story about. And, like, from here, they're like, yeah, these are fun characters, and I could see really cool things being written about them. And then as we go down, of course, it's a tier list, that's how it works. Let's go to Percy. Now, Percy, honestly, is probably, just all things considered, my least favorite of, like, the main characters when we're putting them in the vacuum of, like, how they're supposed to be portrayed. So, like, Railway Series-wise, I guess I could say he's probably, like, my least favorite of, like, the main Railway Series characters, but I still do really like Percy. Again, very much so when he is kind of, like, himself, because Percy... Now, here's the thing. Everyone kind of complains about Percy starting from the Hit era. I don't really have much of an issue with Hit era Percy. I think Hit era Percy is still very strong and pretty darn in character. I, like, just made some, like, was talking about that on Twitter the other day. But, like, all his, like, mispronouncing words and kind of just being really cheeky, but still, like, like, he stands up for himself. He's not this shy little baby boy, like the CGI. Gosh. Oh boy, we talk about CGI Henry and Toby and all them, and don't get me wrong, CGI Toby makes me chomp at the bit, as I already have done earlier in this video. But CGI Percy, really, not a fan. Like, making him, like, get scared at something, that's fine. Like, he gets freaked out when Gordon charges at him. He gets kind of spooked by a dragon. Like, him getting kind of freaked out over some silly things, that totally makes sense. And, like, do that for sure. Yeah, just, like, there we go. but him just being this cute widow shy uwu baby, oh gosh, it does not really feel like Percy for me. But I still do quite like Percy when he is a proper cheeky little twat. Um, so he's gonna go right here. Below all the other mains, but still in the top 3. So like that's the thing. All the main characters in the books in the classic series are all in all just really strong characters. Like obviously they got a lot of focus, so they go through a lot of arcs and just got really interesting over the series, and that's why they are so high up. Like on one hand, it's like since they've been the mains for so long, they've kind of suffered the worst of derailment and flanderization and stuff. But when you get back to like what they were originally and how they've grown in their original stories, they're all really strong characters. So they're all kind of at the top. There's no main character that like I inherently dislike. I dislike versions of them. CGI James is one of my least favorite things ever. Not to mention CGI Toby, but like when they are themselves, they're wonderful. And Peter Sam, kind of another, like I say controversial, but like it's still probably not that controversial because I'm still putting him like pretty darn high up. But Peter Sam is probably my least favorite of the original narrow gauge engines, like 1 through 6. Maybe more than Duke. I don't know. Peter Sam, I don't get me wrong, Peter Sam is fantastic, but he's so fun and charming and just bubbly. But on one hand, like it's very true that with the narrow gauge engines, you can kind of make a lot of like parallels to a lot of the other ones. Like Skarloey is very much like Edward. Rheneas is quite a bit like Toby. Sir Handel is totally a mini Gordon. And Peter Sam, in a lot of ways, I think this is maybe less immediately noticeable than others because they don't like interact. But I think Peter Sam is a lot like Percy. And a lot of times I feel like there's just not, they don't do as much with Peter Sam that really sets him apart from that kind of character type. The one thing he definitely does have going for him is his backstory. His history with Duke and the Mid-Solar closing, and he's got a lot of anxiety about that we see in the books. And that is a really strong element to him. But in a lot of ways, I don't know, I think he's just maybe a little less interesting than a lot of the narrow gauge engines, but I'm still going to put him right here, because he is pretty dang good. So let's go on. Phillip. Oh, Phillip. Now, Phillip, I am putting him at the tippity top of mixed feelings, because on one hand, I think Phillip is very overhated, but on the other hand, I kind of hate him. That's a little harsh and not totally accurate. Early on, like Phillip in season 19, The Great Race, and season 20, I think Phillip was pretty good. His first 2 stories were charming. I kind of hate James, and I kind of don't like Phillip to the rescue or whatever, but more because of James than because of Phillip himself. And then Toby's new friend in season 20 is a honestly pretty strong episode. Toby is almost in character. He's not quite, but he's close. And I really like the kind of Phillip and Toby stuff, and it was so much of a better direction to go than Phillip and Edward, but whatever. And then we got to like, I think The Great Race was like a perfect kind of, I don't want to say finale because that implies that he should like never appear again, but I think it was like kind of the perfect end to his story sort of, and I think after that his story should have been more about Edward, but I want to say Toby. I'd say Toby. Even Thomas, maybe. I really like the idea since I'll get to this later. Actually, know what? I'm going to get to it now. Like I've seen people say like Edward and Phillip is a really clever dynamic because like Phillip is like a parallel to Thomas, so that like reflects Edward and Thomas's relationship and like the adventure begins. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly why it sucks. Actually, the real reason why it sucks is because they literally just don't do anything with it, and it was just an excuse to get Edward out, which I don't really have a problem with Edward leaving. Like it's been said, he's like, I think he does kind of work better in a lot of ways as a secondary character, but the way way they got him out was pretty lazy. But like the fact that Phillip is totally a parallel to like The Adventure Begins, Thomas's younger self. And that makes the relationship with Edward so boring because it's just Edward and Thomas again. We've seen it. So why not have Phillip kind of like have Thomas take him under his wing because Thomas has grown, or at least he should have. And I kind of think that's the issue, is that he hasn't really in CGI like grown from The Adventure Begins. But if you put him with Phillip and had Thomas be like, okay, I actually have to be mature now to like lead this younger engine, then that could be a really strong way to show Thomas grow. Or just put him with Toby, because I think that'd be a lot like really fun and interesting, because I like their dynamic set up. You could have like Phillip and Henrietta. You could have Phillip and Mavis interact. Like they're both Toby's children. Mavis is like his big sister. I think that'd be kind of fun. And then Phillip is on like Thomas's branch line if he's like with Toby a lot of the time. And then maybe you have Toby move to Knapford, and like that's kind of the big shed change thing. Because that's like a thing in the Railway series. Is like Toby sleeps at Knapford. He doesn't sleep at Farquhar anymore. Which, granted, no one sleeps at Farquhar anymore. But have like Toby move to a shed with Phillip, because then you can keep Phillip at Knapford, which makes sense, and then Toby is at Knapford, and that keeps Toby relevant because he's at the main station. I just think there was so much better opportunities. But Phillip's number is where, like, once that episode came out, I was done with Phillip. Like, that's kind of sealed the deal on him for me. Like, okay, I'm annoyed. And then after that, I just did not care anytime he came in. So yeah, he's kind of... I didn't mind him at first. He was fun, and I think they could have taken him in some fun directions. But they just consistently committed to the least interesting things with him and the most obnoxious things, that over time I just got tired of him. So that's why he's here. Porter. Screw Porter. Porter sucks. In fact, I can't quite justify putting him down here because there's just not enough to him. But he's still pretty bad. Like what? Why did Porter ever have to exist? The docks were fine with Salty and Cranky, and like I guess putting more cranes in like was a thing. I don't know, but like, what has Porter ever done? He's got nothing going on, and his design. Everyone will say like, oh, he's a boring character, but he's got a cool design. I mean, sure, it's got nice detail on him, but I don't really like his color. I don't even know what his color is. Like, again, I'm colorblind, so whatever. But is it gray? Is it green? I don't know. And then his scaling. Oh, it's so bad. Like, Oliver's scaling is pretty bad. He's pretty small. James is ridiculously big. Percy's too big. Thomas is too small. Like, there's tons of scaling things. But Porter... it's so noticeable. He sticks out so bad. He just doesn't look good. His face is kind of cool, I guess. And his voices aren't that good either. Like, his US voice is really annoying. Like, the accent works for him, but just the voice is kind of annoying. His UK voice sounds really good, but, I mean, he's not British, so... yeah. Porter kind of sucks. He's just... The one story that he really contributes anything to as a character is not even his debut story. It's the Harvey one, Gone Fishing. And he's, like, you could have had Salty in that role just as easily. So, yeah, there's really no point for Porter to ever exist. And I kind of just wish he didn't. Proteus. I'm gonna kind of put him in this sufficient incidental Chads because... I mean, he's kind of in the same vein as Bertram in a lot of ways, but I think he's a little more interesting than Bertram because he's got this like magic element to him. But it's not like, oh, he's so underdeveloped and he's so boring, because I mean, we hear about him in a story. He may or may not even be real. So like, of course we're not gonna get a bunch of development from him. He's just this legend, and I think that's a cool bit of lore. He is lore, and that doesn't maybe make him the most interesting character, but it's not really supposed to. So yeah, I don't know. Proteus, he's cool. There's tons of really cool fan like interpretations of him that you find everywhere. Um, but yeah, Proteus is just neat. And there's a lot of cool things you can do with him, but he works as just kind of this solitary legend engine that we hear a story about once, and that's all he needs to be. Rajiv. I think Rajiv was fun. I think I've said before that the India characters were a lot more interesting than any of the other like international like countries that Thomas visits. And yeah, Rajiv definitely, he's got a lot more personality than any of the others, and it doesn't feel like it came out of nowhere. Like if you look at the Great Race, he totally kind of feels like he has those same kind of vibes. So I really like that they built off of what little they already had going and like grew him from there, and I think that's really cool. He's maybe a little irritating, but he's not bad. Like not to a point where it's like really a problem. I like that he gets his own story. That was neat. So yeah, Rajiv is cool, and I would have loved. I kind of, I guess, touched on this with Ashima, but like more stories about the Indian Railway that really fleshed them out, like without Thomas being there at all, because he really just hogs all the attention and sucks. So like Ashima and Rajiv and Shankar, and her Noorjahan, they're all really interesting, I think. Or maybe not really interesting, but I think they could have been. And they kind of have a fun dynamic together that I would love to see kind of be more of a thing. Okay, more cars. Where's the other car? We might as well get all the cars out of the way. There he is. I think one of the cars is Tony. I don't know which one's. I think this is Tony because just alphabetically, that's where he would have been like with the T's, and these guys were just in rally cars. I don't. Again, I said this with like the first car. It's just a car. Like, really, they are perfectly sufficient incidental characters. So like, they fulfilled their purpose, and that's all they were supposed to be. But I just don't care about them like in any way, shape, or form, like I do with kind of these guys. So yeah, they're just whatever. But that's fine. They didn't have to be. Raoul kind of sucks. He was, on one hand, he has more personality than most of the international characters, so that's something. Unfortunately, his personality is completely unlikable and obnoxious. And I like the idea of following up the story of him like losing in the Great Railway Show and like them tying it into that. I was really excited when I saw that that was the premise for a story. And then this episode came out and it was just not really done well. And I don't know exactly how you do it better necessarily, other than just making the character less obnoxious. Maybe there's a part of me that's also kind of associating him with that dumb like football scene in the episode where they're just not even in a fantasy sequence, but just in the episode they're like bouncing the ball around. That was so dumb. So yeah, Rebecca. I don't care. She's bad. I don't use this term lightly, but she is a Mary Sue. Like, I think that is a very like overused thing that is thrown onto characters willy-nilly. But she's just bad. I really don't like her. I didn't like really any. Confusion Without Delay was all right. It did feel like she did something, and she had some semblance of like a personality flaw that led her to make a mistake. So there was something. It was breadcrumbs, but it only got worse from there. If that was like the starting point and they got better from there, I would have been like, okay. But boy, Chucklesome Trucks might be my least favorite like non-international like Sodor based episode. Oh gosh, boy, oh boy, yeah, she's kind of bad, and I have plenty of thoughts on how to make her less bad, but we're hitting 30 minutes now, so we're not going to get into that right now, and just leave it at she is bad. Not she had potential to be better, which I guess you could say she did, but again, kind of like with Neville, it kind of takes working from the ground up, which is not necessarily potential. That's just taking creative liberties, which is not a bad thing. I'm all for that. And like that is exactly what I would do with Rebecca. I would do that with Neville too, just come up with my own ideas for him. But that's different than a character having potential, especially if you're going to say untapped potential. Like if you have an empty water bottle, you can fill it up with water and then you have potential. Like there's water in this bottle and you can drink it. But like let's look at some examples. Like we'll say Gordon. Gordon, he was a full water bottle that they got every drop out of. Dennis is a water bottle that had water in it and they just left the water there. A character like Neville never had any water in his bottle, and so you just have to fill it up and then put it to use, which you can do, and I'm all for that. But still, he didn't have anything to go off of. Rebecca kind of does, but just everything she does have is just kind of bad. So she has old, gross, dirty water in her bottle that you have to empty out, wash the bottle, and then fill with new water. With that analogy out of the way, let's go into Reg. Reg, I think he started out okay, but they kind of. I think I'm going to put him in this category. I feel like they kind of dropped the ball with Reg. Like in Tale of the Brave in season 18, I think he was a lot better there. I liked how he was kind of this dry, witty, sarcastic, kind of wisecracking character, and I think that worked well for him. Being a scrapyard crane, I imagine that's kind of a morbid job, and I kind of like the idea that it almost kind of not. I guess it could be kind of like something heavy that he just kind of has to like live with. Like that's what he does. He scraps engines, um, or just things in general. So he kind of has to develop this sort of dry, cynical look on the world to like keep himself up. And I think that was kind of a good groundwork for what a scrapyard crane would be. And then they kind of just made him this like bouncy, loud character. Like his voice changed too. Like it's the same, still Tim Whitnall doing the voice, but it like got higher pitched and a lot more like I'm the scrapyard crane instead of I'm the scrapyard crane. Like it just has a different vibe to it, and he kind of just seemed to change with it. So when I say he needs some love, I think he just needs the love that he got at first, I guess, which wasn't much, I guess. But let's go on. Rex. I've already said Mike is my favorite of the original Arsdale, and Bert is my least. So he's gonna be between these chaps. Let's see. I think above Connor, not quite above Duke. But I think right here is a good spot for Rex. Rex is very fun. I've already talked about how I wish all three of the engines had their voices switched up with each other. Um, but I mean, voices aside, I love Rex and Mike's dynamic. I love Rex in the Railway series, and in the adaptations, they capture him really well. Um, so yeah, Rex is really good. So yeah, Rheneas, I think, is so underrated. People don't give Rheneas enough credit, and I think that's kind of because I don't know. I think he just goes under the radar, and people don't really pick up on who he is. But Rheneas is such a Chad. Rheneas, he's so much more than just like Skarloey too. I think he's honestly, I think I like him more than Skarloey. Don't get me wrong, I love Skarloey, and we'll get to him. Um, Ooh, you know what? He's rising. Yeah, honestly. Oh, whoops. I love Rheneas. Rheneas is really interesting. I love like Gallant Old Engine and Very Old Engines. Are really the two kind of stories that you pull the most from Rheneas. he is hardcore, and I'm all for it. And I think the CGI series it's better than the hit era, the model era. I'll give them that, but I feel like it still kind of juvenilizes him a bit. Um, so yeah, I think he could use some work in the modern. Well, not anymore. He could have, but there were good moments for him in that era. Um, but all in all, I just love classic Rene. He's really cool. Um, we'll finish up the R's here. Rocky. Rocky is kind of in a similar vein as Butch for me. I talked about him earlier. I think Rocky looks cool, but he's just boring. Like, what can you say about Rocky's personality? Like, he's not a major character, I guess. He doesn't need a whole ton going for him, but I don't know. He's really kind of boring to me. So, put him probably right next to Butch, because I think I kind of have... Butch, I think, was a bigger disappointment for me, like I kind of talked about. But Rocky was still... he's just not that interesting. So, I'll put him there. Rosie. Now, Rosie is very much going in this needs more love category, because she's really kind of in the same boat with Molly, and I'm gonna just kind of put her right there. Like, she's not an interesting character. She never has been. She still isn't. Just because she's red now, she's still pretty uninteresting and generic. But I really like her, kind of superficially, I guess. So I don't know. I want her to be better. I want to find her interesting. And yeah, she's just not. And I think she could be. Like, again, you kind of have to fill up the water bottle a bit yourself. But I can see a lot of interesting ways to do it. So yeah. Which, I mean, I guess by the way I'm arguing, you could make a solid case for Neville being there too. But I don't know. There's just, for me at least, and again, like, yeah, this is all my subjective takes. But like for me, I don't know, like characters like Hank and Rosie and Molly have just kind of a different vibe that like makes me want them to like be better characters. And Neville, I just don't care. Rusty, I think maybe also like I might like for Rusty, I maybe like him like 3% less than other people, but he is still pretty darn rad. I think he's just shy of getting into the top three, the third tier. But he is top of fourth tier. So, yeah, Rusty's still really cool. He's non-binary, which is also cool. And yeah, he's pretty dope. So yeah, let's go for Ryan. Now, I mentioned already that there would be a couple more CGI characters in these top tiers. Ryan is absolutely one of them. I really like Ryan. In fact, yeah, he's hopping up here. He is such a fun character. I'm really glad they didn't kind of make him the quote unquote villain in Lost Treasure. I don't think he was ever going to be a bad guy. I think he's going to be maybe a little rude, and that'd be it. Nothing from the merchant. Like the most we have of that depiction of his character is that he was overconfident and dismissive. I don't think that's people have interpreted that as like he was gonna be the bad guy or like a fake out villain, I guess. Which I don't know. Maybe that could have happened. It could have been interesting, but I don't think that's what the merchandise descriptions are getting at necessarily. But either way, I really like him as he is. I love his design. I love the purple on him, honestly. Like, I think I like it better than green. Like, why does he need to be green? Like, Edward's not red. Gordon's not green. Like, they don't have to be the color of their basis. So why does Ryan have to be green? He doesn't. And purple looks nice. Like, as long as the colors that are picked for them aren't just kind of ridiculous and outlandish, cough cough, then I've got no problem with characters having liveries that their bases wouldn't have. Like Molly, her livery looks so nice, and like, of course her basis would never have this livery, but it still looks really good. So yeah, why complain about that? Um, that was it. That's the R's. Okay, we just hit 40 minutes. Let's pause there, and we'll pick up with the S's and see how far we get. Um, there's only S's and like then mostly just T's and then a few of these guys. So I think just one or two more parts after this, and that'll be it. See ya then.